Good afternoon. Eat fresh. I have a new bobblehead. It appears Remo Williams is desperately misunderstanding the entire conversation I had regarding journalists and journalism. The very first thing he did was provide me with a newspaper article about the essay written by Professor Lee. The essay, which I had included a link to in my argument. Now, let me recap my argument for you in case you missed it. My argument was that the Supreme Court has gone as far as to say there is no distinction between the constitutional protections that are afforded to normal citizens and journalists. There's no distinction between the two as far as what the Constitution will protect. That's as far as the Supreme Court's gone. Because remember, in libel cases, it doesn't matter who's speaking. It matters who the subject of the speech is. It matters who's being libeled. That's the test. The court has never said, the Supreme Court, which remember, that's Right to Record's original statement, is that the Supreme Court said that citizens are journalists, and it has not. It has drawn distinctions. It continues to draw distinctions. That's why the end piece, where the public information officer or whatever for the Supreme Court distinguishes very clearly between journalists, and not just journalists and the public, but between levels of journalists. There's the top level where it's their job to report on the Supreme Court, and they're with a media company that has a history of reporting on the Supreme Court, etc. And then you have the step below that where they're journalists with a media corporation, and they're doing a special story on the Supreme Court, so they need a day pass for it. And then you have the level below that where you have writers who aren't associated but have some need to view the happenings at the Supreme Court. So not only is there a difference between the public and journalists, according to the Supreme Court, but there's levels of journalism. So he came back with the essay by Mr. Lee, well, with a news article that talked about the essay by Mr. Lee. But I had already dismissed Mr. Lee because it is his opinion, number one, which I don't share. Number two, he's not a legal expert. He's a journalism professor. He teaches people how to be journalists. Number three, he's not the Supreme Court. Maybe I already said that. He's not a legal expert. I disagree with him, with his analysis, and he's not the Supreme Court. And my original point was that the Supreme Court hadn't said it. And you may also remember my statements at the beginning. If you do some plumbing, are you a plumber? Well, yeah, but you're not a plumber. I know it's a minor distinction, but it's a distinction. You're doing plumbing, but you're not a plumber. You're not a professional. It's not what you do. It's, you're putting a pipe in. It's different. You're not carrying all the insurances. You haven't gone through your apprenticeship. There's differences between someone who puts a pipe in and a plumber. That's why we don't call someone who just replaced a toilet in their home a plumber. We say, yeah, you replaced a toilet in your home. You did some plumbing. You're not a plumber. Sane people can gather that difference. So anyway, my new bobblehead, Remo Williams, he came at me with Brandsburg. Brandsburg talks about states that have newsman's exceptions for grand juries, which are exceptions set aside for newspapermen, news people whose job it is to gather the news and to publish the news. That's different than an average citizen. In Brandsburg, a newspaperman, a reporter of some sort, wanted to quash a grand jury subpoena because he didn't want to give up his source. And the court said there is no special exception for reporters. Saying that there's no special exception for reporters doesn't mean that there is no difference between a non-reporter and a reporter. An average citizen can make a report, can write a blog, can disseminate information, can be interviewed by the press, and give a report based on what they saw. I don't know why everybody seems to be so hung up on trying to be journalists, as if it cloaks them with some level of respectability or something. It doesn't. It really doesn't. If you think there's no difference, you have to explain why the Supreme Court differentiates. And I strongly suggest that you challenge the Supreme Court. You should also inquire as to why police departments and other agencies that hand out press passes, why they differentiate, why they require more than just, yeah, I'm a citizen, therefore I'm a journalist. Press pass, please. Obviously, they don't. Somebody also asked me about Jim Acosta being kicked out of the White House press corps. And the subsequent lawsuit. I don't honestly know what theory they're going to go with to try to say that Jim Acosta has some right to go into the White House. It is by invitation only. There is no constitutional requirement that the White House allow anybody in there to do it. The White House has a press corps there so that the White House can get its message out to the news media, who disseminate the information to the public. But they have always selected who they allow in, and to the best of my knowledge, they haven't said CNN can't come back. They've said Jim Acosta can't come back. So CNN would just have to send another person. I honestly don't know what theory they would go under, even if Trump kicked out CNN, period. I don't understand what you don't have to, if you're president, you don't have to talk to any particular news agency. You don't have to give interviews. You don't have to allow people in to various events. In fact, in Akins v. Knight, which Right to Record brought up not in the appellate decision, but in the district court decision, the plaintiff, one of the allegations the plaintiff made was that the police department had some sort of a press day, and they invited only specific members of the press, and the plaintiff wanted to go and he wasn't on the list, so he didn't get to go. And he thought that was in some way restricting his First Amendment rights. And I don't think it is. You don't have a right. It is a limited forum at best. The government can control who comes in, who goes out, who speaks, who doesn't. So, I mean, if it even is a forum. The White House itself is definitely a non-public forum. You can't go on the grounds and do anything. It's very much a non-public forum. And the White House also doesn't allow you to film in there except for very specific kinds of ways, if I remember correctly. Anyway, I think that's about it. I don't think Acosta's lawsuit's going to go anywhere, but I also didn't think that the Facebook lawsuit where somebody was banned from or blocked from Trump's personal Twitter, that's what it was, a Twitter account. Of course, that one is being appealed. I don't see how Trump's personal Twitter account can become a public forum, although if it does, then that means that Twitter can't block or ban anyone, because then they would be restricting your access to a public forum. I don't know. That's a little weird. Anyway, thanks for watching. Have a great afternoon.